Oh, here we go. We're recording. Hi. We're waiting for Brian.
I started the recording, and yes, we're still waiting on Brian.
Okay, well, we'll just hang in there for a little bit because he's going to have to go through the governor's proclamation and the meeting procedures. So we want to make sure we follow all the rules.
Well, Neil, after looking at your curriculum vitae, now I know where you got that nice British accent.
Oh, don't insult me. I'm from Ireland. Now, come on. Can someone give Brian a call and hurry him up? I don't think I've got his number. Hang on a second.
I've got it.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, we're going to be starting late today, and I don't like that. I like to start on time.
I get a voice recording, but I would say we all know the routine. I would call the meeting to order. I don't
Okay.
think-
All right, Jim. I was thinking that Brian had to be here, but he can join us. So, okay. I'm Neil Gaynor, president of MUD-SIG. It's now 1:32 p.m. on January the 20th, 2020. And I'm calling the meeting of the Board of Directors of MUD-SIG to order. Since we don't have our legal counsel, perhaps.
This is Brian.
Hey, there he is.
Hey, sorry about that. I had a little trouble logging in. I hit the wrong passcode.
Okay. Well, you're just in time to explain the governor's proclamation and meeting procedures.
Yes, sir. Happy to. This is Brian Yates with SPH. Appreciate everybody joining us today for the Montgomery County MUD number 6 Board of Directors meeting for Wednesday, January the 20th, 2021. As in previous meetings, I'll briefly go through the meeting procedures for our remote meeting, and then we'll perform a roll call. So to begin with, I need to remind everyone the meeting is being recorded as required by the Texas Open Meetings Act. Second, please remember to state your name before you speak, including the making of any motions. When you're not speaking, please be sure to mute your line. Third, we'll continue the practice of having a roll call to vote on each motion. After a motion has been made and seconded, please wait until you hear your name called and then respond with a verbal aye, a nay, or an abstention. Finally, we need to identify each person who's joining the meeting remotely today so we can accurately reflect the attendance in the minutes of the meeting. I'll perform a roll call for the board members, followed by staff and consultants. When you hear your name or your company called, please respond by indicating that you're present in the meeting. Likewise, if you need to leave the meeting before it adjourns, please announce that you're doing so before you disconnect. Once I've completed the roll call for directors, staff, and consultants, I'll ask for any members of the public to identify themselves for the record. So starting with our board of directors, Neil Gaynor.
President.
Brooke Hamilton.
Present.
Deborah Sargent.
Present.
Ron Cucci.
Present.
Bruce Cunningham.
Present.
That completes the roll call for our directors. We'll move on to Woodlands Water staff. Jim Stinson.
Present.
Mike Mooney.
Present.
Maureen Bourgeois.
Present.
Jeannie Scott.
Present.
Shelley Lawson Kennedy.
I'm here.
Any other members of Woodlands Water staff in the meeting? Okay, we'll move on to San Jacinto River Authority staff. Ron Kelly.
Present.
Chris Meeks.
Present.
Matt Corley.
Present.
Any other members of River Authority staff in the meeting?
I do not see any, Brian.
Okay. Do we have a representative from Howard Hughes in the meeting? All right, we'll move on to members of the public. Do we have any, well, actually, I need to ask for consultants for MUD 6. Do we have MUD 6 consultants in the meeting?
John Knox with Knox, Cox and Company.
Any other MUD 6 consultants in the meeting? All right, now we'll move on to members of the public. Do we have any members of the public in the meeting? We need to identify you for the record as well.
Brian, this is Neil Gaynor. I know that one of my neighbors was going to try to get in via Zoom. It looks like he's having some difficulty. He may be joining us, perhaps if he resolves his issues. Just want to let you know that.
Okay. Well, if we don't have any members of the public in the meeting at this point, then that would complete our roll call, and I'll hand it back over to begin the agenda to Neil.
Neil, this is Ron Kutchy. Can I interrupt for a second and ask Brian a question?
Sure, go ahead, Ron.
It's been brought to my attention, at least at the trustee meeting last week, that members of the public have been calling in to meetings, at least last week, Wednesday's trustee meeting, and not identifying themselves. So if that's the case, is number one, is that allowed? And if it is allowed, then number two is, why do we even ask for members of the public to identify themselves if they don't need to?
This is Brian. So the procedures we have in place are an effort to keep a full record for our minutes of who is in attendance. Now, I mean, in theory, could you have a large public meeting where you've got 100 people in attendance and you're not going to get all their folks in there, and you just list in the minutes that you've got numerous folks, and you just identify the individuals who speak from members of the public? Yes. And would that be legal? Yes. But I think best practice, especially in our meeting environment, we don't have an extraordinary number of folks attending the meetings, and so it's a more complete record to know who is attending our meetings to the extent that we can. We generally have sign-in sheets at our in-person meetings, so that's in keeping with that procedure. I believe, I know with the telephone conference meetings, we're able to see all the numbers that have dialed in and identify if there's one that doesn't seem correct, but not correct, but looks like one that there hasn't been anyone speaking from. I'm sure there's probably that same feature with Zoom. I'd have to defer to Maureen and Shelley on that, but there's probably a way to be able to ask when we're doing the roll call if there's someone who hasn't spoke from a particular number, or if they're showing up on the Zoom, to be able to call them out and ask for them to identify themselves.
Thank you, Brian. This is Ron Kutchy again. The reason I ask is that Kent Maggart, who I think we all know was listening in on the trustee meeting last week, Arthur Bredhoff, who I've talked to, also called and listened in, and why he didn't identify himself, he felt he had nothing to say at public comments. And I also understand from Arthur that Jeff Forward from the Villager was listening into the trustee meeting and didn't identify himself. So I passed it along for what it's worth.
Appreciate it. Yeah, I think we may need to visit offline, or I may need to visit offline with Jim and Maureen about best practice to try to address that in the future.
Thank you.
I signed in partway through the comments. If you took roll, I did not appear. So if you'd like, my name is George Wassoff, resident Lakeside Cove.
Yes, George. Neil, you're muted in case you didn't know.
My apologies. Zoom is a wonderful piece of software. Thank you, George. Appreciate that. Brian, did you get Mr. Wassoff's name, a member of the public?
This is Brian. Yes, sir. We've got that for the record. Thank you.
Okay, moving on to agenda item 2, receive comments from the public. Mr. Wassoff.
Oh, perfect timing. Thank you, Neil. I'm on the call at Neil's request. Of late, we've had quite a few episodes of excess or elevated H2S odors in the Lakeside Cove development. And of course, y'all are familiar with the ongoing issues of elevated H2S. I'd like to make just a couple, 3 comments. Number one, we'd sure like to see resolution of this sooner rather than later. Environmentally speaking, it's rather distasteful to have strong odors of H2S at night when you're having dinner or when you're fixing to go to bed. It's really no way to live. Secondly, is that I find it amazing that when I do dial in, as friendly as the on-call operators are, they're unaware of the situation at the wastewater treatment facility itself. If I don't call, they don't know what's going on. And I've been in the oil and gas industry for my entire career, involved in operations. And there's all sorts of detection equipment available. I would presume that that is the case also in the wastewater treatment world, where alarms can sound or things can be detected and people know what's going on in the operation and they're able to take corrective action. In the cases most recently, I call in and it's news to the operator. So I think there's something operationally missing is my point. There may be other problems, and I'm not going to get into that. You all have the studies going on, but detection and corrective action in real time are things that can be done and they're not being done. And operationally, that's just no way to run a business. Even if it is a utility, that's still no way to run a business, especially one where the public is adversely affected. Those are my comments.
Okay, thank you, George. Much appreciate your comments. And I don't see anyone else from the public here. No. Okay, so we'll move on to agenda item 3, receive president and director's comments. May I ask any director if they have comments at this point? Hearing none, I have a couple of items. I did request, following George's email to me, I did request an update from SJRA, from Matt and Chris on the odor reporting. And I think we could probably wait until item 10 until we can have a brief update on that. Then the other thing, at the GMVA meeting last night, a resident at Settlers Way had described drainage issues in his area. And I was thinking we could have a discussion of that matter under agenda item 18, the general manager's report. Any comments from directors? Last call. Okay, moving on to agenda item 4, consider and act on requests for adjustments to or relief from the specific charges imposed by the district. So that would be over to you, Mike.
This is Mike. I have nothing this month. Thank you.
Well, that is most appreciated after the last couple of big ones. Boy, I tell you. All right.
This is Jeannie and I don't have any either.
I'm sorry? Oh,
This is Jeannie and I don't have any either.
Thank you so much. Appreciate that. Okay, moving on to the consent agenda, and I will read each of these out so we have a record. Agenda item 5, review and act on the minutes of the December 2020 Board of Directors meeting. Item 6, review and act on the financial reports and disbursements of December 2020. Item 7, receive and act upon the monthly investment reports and quarterly investment reports for the period October through December of 2020. Item 8, receive the tax collector's report. Item 9, consider and act on approving attendance and expenses for district and/or Woodlands Water Trustee business. Item 10, receive the San Jacinto River Authority Woodlands Division report. Item 11, adoption of resolution authorizing an additional penalty on delinquent personal property taxes and authorize delinquent tax attorney to collect delinquent personal property taxes beginning April 1st, 2021, including the filing of lawsuits as necessary. And finally, in the consent agenda, item 12, adoption of resolution adopting list of qualified brokers authorized to engage in investment transactions with district. Now, does any director wish to move an item from the consent agenda into the regular agenda? Hearing none. Does any director have questions or corrections to any of the items in the consent agenda?
This is Brooke. I have one question regarding the operating report. In looking at the monthly blend ratio, it seems like it's quite a bit different than the budgets, and I was curious as to the variance. This is on page 17 of the package.
Yes, sir. This is Matt Corley. You will notice that the surface water blend has increased. That's due to our Lone Star permit. We had experienced a really dry summer, and so our groundwater pumpage was more than expected. So instead of amending our permit with Lone Star, we've increased the surface water production to make sure we stay underneath that groundwater allocation for 2020. You'll see that blend start to correct in the spring months. It'll be more 65-35 blend.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Okay, are there any other questions or corrections?
I would like to make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Before we make the motion, I think I would like to call for a motion, but I want to hear from Matt or Chris on my request regarding the odors.
Certainly, this is Chris Meeks. So just kind of recap January so far. We have received 8 odor complaints over 5 days. All odor complaints came in via phone call and/or email. In some cases, both, which is good for record purposes, as well as getting somebody on site. All odor complaints were investigated. A lot of times it was River Authority staff as well as Woodlands Water online or agency staff as well to come out and investigate. In all cases, we looked through Lakeside Cove community through the collection system. Then we also did go to the wastewater plant to check for any abnormal items there. The collection system, the flow was normal. There was nothing abnormal about the collection system at that point in time related to the flow, the condition, or anything. Wastewater plant, there was nothing abnormal going on. There was no normal process operations going on, such as decanting or anything out of the ordinary that may have caused odors. So we do have 2 monitors at the wastewater plant. One is at our headworks, which is closer to sawdust. This is where all the raw sewage comes in. We also have another monitor at the fence line, basically the rear gate of the wastewater plant as it goes into Golden Road. And so during the month of January up until January 18th, when I pulled the data to go through it, the highest reading we had at that point in time was 28 parts per billion. And the headworks, it was roughly 70 parts per billion. The TCQ, for reference, requires that our plant does not emit odors above 80 parts per billion at the fence line. So, brief recap, but in general terms, there was no corrective maintenance going on during the periods of the 28 ppb or the 70 ppb. There was no abnormal discharges, incoming water. It essentially, at the time, it was a normal operating wastewater plant.
Okay, well, thank you, Chris, for that update. I appreciate that. Okay, so now I would like Bruce to make your motion to
Motion
accept
again.
the consent agenda.
Make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
May I have a second?
This is Ron Kutsy. I'll second.
Thank you, Ron. Is there any further discussion? Let us go to a vote. Brian, would you take the votes, please?
This is Brian. If there's no further discussion on the item, I'll go ahead and call the vote. Neil, how do you vote?
Aye.
Brooke,
Aye.
Deborah,
Aye.
Ron,
Aye.
Bruce,
Aye.
motion carries.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Moving on to item 13, review and consider approval of district's financial year 2019 to 2020 draft audit report. I guess, Mr. Knox, that would go over to you for discussion.
Yes, thank you. This is John Knox with Knox Cox and Company. I'll give just a brief overview of the report and then open it up to questions. I hope everybody's had a chance to take a look at it. Page 1 and 2 is our standard opinion. It's unqualified. It's really the meat and potatoes of this audit report for us anyway. That's what we work to get you to there. On page 12 is your statement of activities and governmental funds, and a pretty looks like a pretty standard year, for lack of a better term. We increased fund equity by a little over 125,000 and increased our net position by a little over 220,000. So kind of steady as you go, best way to describe it. We added a footnote this year that I've been making all the MUDs aware of. That's on page 30. It's the uncertainties, and we just speak toward the pandemic, and we recognize that it could adversely affect us, but we, of course, hope it doesn't. And I'm glad to hear everybody's getting their shots. On page 44 is the board list with terms and titles. And I always ask the board to take a close look at that, make sure everything looks right, and let me know if they see any changes. And of course, we've got a couple of weeks before we're going to file this report. And so what I'm hoping for today is a motion that approves this report subject to any minor modifications that may be made by directors or consultants related to the report. And when I say minor, it's typos and you know, maybe a number's wrong here. Nothing major, nothing material. The report's due to TCEQ mid-February, 135 days from year end, and so I'll open it up to questions.
Okay, any questions for sorry, this is Neil Gaynor. Any questions for Mr. Knox? Hearing none, I am requesting a motion to approve the
This is
district.
Deborah Sargent, and I make a motion to approve the draft audit report of 2019-2020.
Okay, may I have a second, please?
I'll second. This is Brooke.
Thank you, Brooke. Is there any further discussion? Again, Brian, would you take the vote, please?
This is Brian. If there's no further discussion, we'll call the vote. Neil, how do you vote?
Aye.
Brooke,
Aye.
Deborah,
Aye.
Ron,
Aye.
Bruce,
Aye.
motion carries.
Thank you all. Okay, moving on. Agenda item 14, authorized preparation and submission of district information to Texas Comptroller of Public Accounts as required by section 403.0241 Texas Government Code and chapter 203 Texas Local Government Code for inclusion in the Special Purpose District Public Information Database. I don't think there's anything controversial about this. I would just ask for a motion to authorize the preparation and submission of the required information. May I have a motion?
So moved. This is Brooke.
Okay, thank you, Brooke. May I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Bruce. Is there further discussion? Hopefully not. Okay, Brian, let's go to the vote. If you can record that, please.
Yes, sir. If there's no further discussion, we'll call the roll. Neil, how do you vote?
Aye.
Brooke,
Aye.
Deborah,
Aye.
Ron,
Aye.
Bruce,
Aye.
motion carries.
Okay, thank you, Brian. Moving on to item 15, and this is always one of the great joys of working on a board. Grant exemptions from taxation for 2021 and adoption of a resolution in connection therewith. And we have the wording of the resolution on page 28 with the signature page on 29. I'm assuming everyone has read that resolution and agree with it. May I have a motion to vote in favor of a resolution concerning exemptions from taxation? That is the $10,000 exemption in regard to disability and the 20% homestead exemption. May I have a motion, please?
This is Ron Kutchy. So moved.
This is
Second.
Deborah Sargent. I second.
Thank you, Deborah. Further discussion? Hearing none. Brian, would you take the vote, please?
Yes, sir. If there's no further discussion, we'll call the vote. Neil, how do you vote?
Aye.
Brooke,
Aye.
Deborah,
Aye.
Ron,
Aye.
Bruce,
Aye.
motion carries.
Okay, thank you, everyone, and thank you, Brian. Neil Gaynor again. Well, we're back to Brian. Item number 16, receive the attorney's report.
This is Brian. The only item of a general nature I have to report today is the legislative session did get underway last week in Austin. As expected, Dade Phelan was selected as the new House Speaker. They are still working through how they're going to handle the logistics of considering bills, including committee hearings and testimony, whether there will be hearings and testimony. If so, will it be in person or virtual or some combination of the two? So still working through those early session logistics in light of COVID and some of the security concerns following what happened in DC. So we'll be monitoring that. And then, of course, we'll be bringing bills to the board's attention as they are introduced to make their way through the session if they have the potential to have a material impact on the business of the district. That is all I have to report under the attorney's report today, but happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Ms. Neil Gaynor, are there any questions for Brian? Okay, moving on to item 17, review information regarding MUD 1 and MUD 6 consolidation study. And perhaps I can address this. Bob Lilac of MUD 1 and I have met with Jim to discuss what a consolidation study would require. And Bob and I have provided a high-level overview in the packet for directors. And certainly I take note that Director Kutchy asked about the cost savings realized by the consolidation of MUDs 2 and 40, which really is a precedent, I suppose, for consolidation in the woodlands. And there are, of course, a number of issues to discuss, such as the AMI sequencing, consolidation, pros and cons, an election, the tax rate, and so forth, and other issues that could be identified as a study would proceed to determine whether or not a recommendation could be made in regards to consolidation. So directors are aware, Bob Lilac, president of MUD 1, and Walt Lachevsky, director of MUD 1, are going to be MUD 1 representatives on an ad hoc consolidation study committee. And I propose that we have myself and a director, and I would really appreciate if Ron would join this effort, because I really appreciate his interest, and would be very confident that he would come to an assessment on pros and cons and a recommendation that we could all support. So does any director have a question or a comment on this at this point?
This is
This is
Deborah,
Brooke.
and this is Deborah, and I have a quick question. Is looking at the consolidation for an election this year, like in May or November, or like a year from May?
I would not recommend a special election in May. I think it's just way too close to be able to get everything done. I would probably add cost. I would look at if there's an election, the earliest would be November, and much more likely May of 2022. So we're way out in the future by the time we get everything squared away.
Perfect. Thank you.
This is Brooke. I have a question. Is this merger taking place in a time frame such that we can see whether there have in fact been some cost savings and efficiencies, or it's too little time passed?
You're referring to the consolidation of MUD 2 and MUD 40?
Yes.
Yeah, and I would really think that that is a critical part of the investigation that has to be made by the committee. And I've also, I think I emailed you, Jim, if you could comment on how we would go forward with that. I think I was just following up with Ron's request. If you have any comments, please.
Well, the savings from our administrative staff, we've explained a few times. The merging doesn't allow us the ability to lay off staff and reduce our staff. It allows us to use our staff in a more efficient, productive way, less meetings. There are certainly true savings in, I think, legal fees, director fees, other fees that are associated with one MUD. If you merge one and eliminate one, you've got real cost savings in several categories that we could bring forward and look at in more detail.
And thank you, Jim. Neil Gaynor again. And that's what I would anticipate that the Consolidation Study Committee would uncover. Are there any further comments or questions from directors?
Neil, this is Ron Kutchy. Number one, I want to thank you for the invitation to participate in that committee. I have probably got a bias as presented against the consolidation. I did when I observed 2 and 40 and the opportunity for 6 to come in some 4 or 5 years ago. And even looking at the numbers that you and Bob Lilac had put together, assuming all the soft savings and administrative costs, et cetera, some $64,000, we're still talking about 1.8% reduction in the total water bill amongst the combined districts. And this to me is what I call trivial pursuit. We're not really not going for the vital few. And MUD 6 just less than 2 years ago proposed a 6.5% increase in our tax rate from 7.5 to 8 cents. And one of the proposals that you and Bob have put together, rather than have MUD 1 have an increase to match ours, the increase in the tax rate, as I recall from Bruce Cunningham, was to give us a little bit more buffer in our infrastructure reserves so that being an old mud, that we would have the necessary funding to address incidents and leaks and major calamities as they occurred. Well, that 6.5% reduction was passed for good reason a couple of years ago, and to consider reducing it to match Mud 1's existing rate strikes me as ludicrous. And we've also got an AMI conversion going on right now, and it won't be known for months, if not a couple of years, what the actual cost increase is going to be to the average customer. But it's anticipated, and it's been announced that due to leakage being addressed, the new and more accurate AMI system out there is probably going to increase most people's water bills. And with that being an overhang right now that we're going to have to address at the same time that we've got other concerns going on, I think I would like to withdraw from being considered to be a committee member from Mud 6. I would suggest that Deborah Sargent or Brooke Hamilton, who I'm guessing might have a more open mind on this, would be better representatives and better committee members from Mud 6. And Neil, I do support you being one of those two members.
Okay, Neil
you.
Gaynor again. Thank you, Ron. I really appreciate frank and open views on matters such as this. It's a major event, of course, consolidation. And I really want the involvement of everyone who feels that they can make a fair assessment of the path forward. So if you're choosing not to participate in the ad hoc committee, can I get a sense from Deborah or Brooke with regard to your participation, and who would like to go first?
Well, this is Brooke. I'll jump
Okay.
in. Oh, Deborah, go ahead. You beat me to the.
Go ahead, Brooke. I'm sorry.
No, I would say I have some skepticism as well. I think cost savings is one thing, but would we want to merge and get Grogan's Point with their flood problems brought into our particular situation? So I'm skeptical as to whether this makes sense, regardless of saving a few pennies.
I guess the question I'm asking, Brooke, is would you participate in with me in looking at whether or not it's worthwhile to do a consolidation?
I would participate, but I think, like Ron, I wanted to start off and say that I have some negative leanings, but if you want me to do it, I'll do it.
If I may make a comment, I think it would be good to have somebody with negative opinion so that there is a balance of opinion. I mean, I think everybody knows what my opinion is. But I would also ask you to look at what are the implications of becoming a city. I think we all have seen Gordy Bunch's speech to the Tea Party back in November, in which he calls for the rapid incorporation or inclusion of the MUDs into the city if it is formed. And I think it is really time to find out what assumptions he was using and clarify those and how they are going to affect everything that's going on, because that will be happening at approximately the same time.
And this is Deborah Sargent, and I was more than happy to serve, but on the committee, on the ad hoc committee. I think we also need to look at, I agree with what Bruce is saying. I'd like to see the impact or the cost impact if we consolidated all the MUDs, because it is going to happen. And so I think we need to look at that as well. So, those are my thoughts.
It makes sense only to have one MUD when we can. Having 10 MUDs is crazy.
Okay, it's a bit of a challenge in hoping to appoint a willing partner, if you will. But I would prefer, as Bruce indicated, to have some skepticism on the ad hoc committee. And if I could, Brooke, I would want to lean on you to help us out here.
Brooke, you've got the economic and financial background.
Okay, I will accept an appointment reluctantly, but I will accept it.
Thank you, sir.
I really appreciate that. And I think you'll, as we go through this as a team, the Consolidation Study Committee, all of us need to be behind the recommendation. If the pros and cons are out of balance, then hey, it'll be a straightforward decision that we can all support. And I'm hoping we can find that path forward together. So, is there any further discussion on this matter? Okay, well, let's go on to agenda item 18, receive the general manager's report, and that will be Jim. And as I mentioned earlier, we want to have a brief discussion of the drainage issue at on Settlers Way there.
Excuse me. I did reach out to John Yours before the meeting, and I'm guessing that he conveyed that I'm willing to go out and meet with this resident and review it. We did look at this area a year or so ago. As I recall, there is a MUD 6 drainage easement that runs in that area, and kind of complicating matters, there's also a parkway, if I remember, a paved, maybe concrete pathway that is maintained by the township. I think I saw some photographs where the drainage pipes underneath that pathway were clogged up and didn't appear to function correctly. I think we looked at it again several months back, so I'm happy to go out there and revisit it and see what we can do. I'm pretty comfortable that we can probably do some things to improve it. I know at the time we looked at it before, there was a concern that I think the home or one or two homes that have flooded on more than one occasion are built very, very low and actually may be lower than the natural ground. And that was an observation that I made when I was there quite a few months ago that presents a real challenge for that one property. But I'm happy to look at it again and send a crew in to do what we can to improve things.
Okay, thank you, Jim, and I will allow you to proceed further, and I appreciate your efforts here.
Okay. During the trustee meeting, we had a presentation from Matt Corley on, I think it was titled the Sixth and Final Grand Accounting Recap or Summary. And I stated at the time there was some really good data and information involved in that report. And it's my intent to get that information in front of each of the 10 MUDs and the directors, but I didn't get it on your agenda this month, but it will be on your agendas next month with the detail in your packet to look at. And again, I think there's some good, important, valuable data in there that talks about the grand accounting and how the path forward might look. At the trustee meeting, we had a lengthy discussion on the topic of wastewater treatment consolidation. The committee that is working with the SJRA and the Woodland staff on that held a meeting right before the trustee meeting. We went through a number of data regarding impacts to retail sewer rates. We looked at developing a scope of work for the study to consolidate. We talked about public engagement and what that might look like. The committee had a number of questions that they wanted to get answered before that went to the trustees for a recommendation. So I'm hopeful the committee's going to regroup with SJRA staff and have some firm information to present at the February meeting on wastewater treatment consolidation. Ron Kelly reported that the summary judgment ruling from the Travis County Court regarding the lawsuit with Conroe has been appealed by Conroe. I think I can state this, summarize it correctly. Conroe has appealed that decision, that finding, or the summary judgment finding. They've appealed it and requested that appeal skip the appellate court and go straight to the Supreme Court, which is kind of a unique request. Ron, anything to add on that today?
Nope, you got it.
Okay. After a few times, I'm getting it right. Also, we discussed at the trustee meeting the directive from the Sunset Commission that the San Jacinto River Authority do additional public engagement and public education with the customers of its wholesale customers, which means our residents, is being discussed and vetted through an ad hoc committee, the same committee that's of audit and finance committee that's working on the wastewater treatment consolidation. An example of what that enhanced public outreach and public education may look like is a document that we're working on that will be sent to our residents, MUD residents, that outlines the process for developing the budgets and the water and sewer rates, wholesale rates for the Woodlands Division, and a document that outlines the budget process and the rate setting for the GRP division up at Lake Conroe. So we'll be presenting that to our residents fairly soon, which details all the MUD meetings and the trustee meetings that we will be going through over the next several months to adopt the GRP rates and the Woodlands Division wholesale rates. In your packet, there's a summary of our engagement with HARC and the groundwater research group. If you've got any questions on that, I'll be happy to answer those. Also at the trustee meeting, we had a couple of residents that had concerns regarding the poles that have been erected on San Jacinto River Authority properties around the Woodlands to help transmit the signal for our meter upgrade. So I'll be meeting with those residents and seeing what we can do to address their concerns and coming back to the trustees in February on that topic. Also in your packet is a notice of a webinar on subsidence. This is going to be held later this month, sponsored by a firm called Intera, which I would encourage you, if you have time, to sign up and attend that webinar. Also in your packet is a copy of what we call our content agreement, part of our consolidated district policy manual. This is an agreement that's been used over the years between the developer, typically the Woodlands Development Company or Howard Hughes, and the MUD to formalize the relationship for infrastructure that's being put in the ground and then later reimbursed through bond proceeds. So we've had a couple of requests to take a look at that agreement and maybe update it some. Brian Yates and I will be reviewing that and probably discussing it at the trustee meeting again at your MUD meetings next month. Also, Ron, would you like to give a report or update on the GMA 14 meeting today and the interesting events there?
Yeah, it was a 2-hour meeting. This was the next to last GMA 14 meeting in February. They will start finalizing and negotiating and voting on the desired future conditions. Lone Star for the just to give the background, and I know Neil, I don't know if you were in on that conversation today or not, but for the last 2 years, sir.
I was on the meeting. I was at the meeting, and I just want to make a comment. Wade Oliver gave a master class on faulting.
Yes. For the last 2 years, they've been talking about this concept of this multi-metric desired future condition, where you'd have 2 different metrics in the desired future condition. One would be about limitations of groundwater reductions in the aquifer, and one would be the maximum amount of subsidence that would be allowed, and having those 2 variables together. And they've been talking about this for 2 years, and today Lone Star told the rest of the GCDs that they would object to and not support any DFC that had any kind of limitation for subsidence, which was it was frustrating. I know it frustrated the consultants. I know it frustrated the GCD. So there's going to be an interesting battle that's going to happen over the next couple of months as they decide what those GCDs are. And I would suggest that if there's ever a time that anybody wanted to make comments to Lone Star, directly to Lone Star and a GMA 14 and your feelings about subsidence, it's going to be over the next 3 months. So I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Ron, I totally support you on getting in touch with Lone Star. But did I also see that you've got a couple of new board members, including one from the Woodlands?
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about Mr. Morva?
I met him once. All I know is he's an anesthesiologist lives in the Woodlands. And he's now on our board. I don't know a whole lot more than that. I just briefly met him once. I don't know if any of y'all know him or not.
Well, no, but I did a little research on him. I see he has collected millions of dollars from pharmaceutical companies, and it looks like he might be a bag man to the politicians. I don't know.
I don't know that side of it.
Also, I wanted to report from the trustee meeting, there was a discussion regarding the engineering of the tin man, that improvement to the tin man and the biofilter. We got an updated, I guess more of an actual cost for that engineering went from about 130 to 197,000. So I think that that process is going forward, but the River Authority did report it's going to be more expensive than what was originally estimated, but this is a firm number. I think the number includes an additional testing of the system to make sure the fan is sized right, the new fan that's put on the tin man to create the vacuum and disperse or create the vacuum in the system and then disperse the product, and of course filter the product so it wouldn't impact the Lakeside Cove community. But there'll be more discussion on that. The trustees requested to have it as an agenda item to get more detail into why that increase and what was needed. But I think it was stated they didn't want that to slow down the process. They just wanted some more information. So that will be presented next month as well. And that concludes my report, and I'm open for questions.
Okay, are there any questions? This is Neil Gaynor. Are there any questions for Jim concerning his report? Okay, thank you, Jim. Okay, moving on to agenda item 19. Consider an act on representative to the One Water Task Force, formerly the Woodlands Drainage Task Force. I think I need to inform the directors that last year, Director Reiser, or chairman of the One Water Task Force, invited me to join. So I'm not entirely clear as to what this agenda item is in regard to. If someone could enlighten me, I'd appreciate that.
Yeah, you were invited to join by Chairman Reeser, but last month we talked about the list of task force members. We never filled, when Deborah Sargent was not on the board, she was still listed as a task force member. So we need to formalize who is the MUD 6 task force representative. Neil has a special invitation from the chairman, but you also had Deborah Sargent, and as I remember, Bruce Cunningham was also on the task force. So
well, what happened there was when Deborah left the board, Wilson McCoy was the first alternate, and I was the second alternate. Wilson declined to fill the position. Now, if they want to, Deborah wants it back, she can have it. Deborah?
Oh, I'm sorry. That's fine. I don't care. If someone else would rather serve on the task force, that's fine too.
Well, and each MUD was offered an opportunity to serve. So you had two people that were selected. So your MUD has two spaces to fill for that task force. And
So
Neil is.
that would mean, I'm sorry, this is Deborah. So that means that we would have 3 board members from MUD 6 at the task force meeting?
No,
Good.
I would drop off if you want to go on, Deborah. I haven't done
Okay.
much.
I'm good either way, Bruce. I don't,
Okay, why don't you take it?
okay.
I'm backing off things.
Okay, this is Neil Gaynor. I definitely support Bruce's putting Deborah's name forward. Now, Jim, for clarification, we're speaking of a member and alternate. Is that how it's to be set up, or what is it specifically clarification is required on?
If you're going to only have one person, I'm going to have to look. I can't remember where they fell. I think Deborah's was an actual member and there was an alternate. So
Jim, as I recall, originally the MUDs were allotted 3 representatives. And the 3 we had were Helen Bostic, Deborah, and Laura Norton.
and it's a little bit more convoluted than that. It was some MUDs chose not to have any representation at all. So when all the MUDs selected somebody, we met in the meeting room here at our office, and we actually drew straws to see what position they were going to get.
No, I remember that.
Yeah, so there are some MUDs with no representation. Only those that had an interest submitted candidates to sit on that board. What I would recommend, if Deborah wants to serve, her name's been in the slot for a while, put her back in the slot, and then we'll figure out who's the member and who's the alternate. And the reality is, we've had on many meetings, the member and the alternate come. It's kind of a loosely combobulated group. I'll put it that way.
That's a very interesting way you put it, Jim.
But according to Chairman Reeser, it's an open invitation. Everybody's welcome.
Okay, well, I think it'd be great for another voice on the One Water Task Force. So the way I'm seeing it is that we would deal with it in this way: a member and an alternate from MUD 6. Is that how this should best be characterized?
No, sir. Well, again, if we recognize you as serving as a direct invite from Chairman Reeser, then if Deborah would like to remain as a member, the way I see it is MUD 6 now has essentially 1 representative, and then we'll work out who's the alternate and who's not in maybe another meeting downstairs where we draw straws again.
Okay, well, let's act that there should be representation of MUD 6 on the board, and we won't use specific names at this point because that is an issue still in the air. And so if I could have a motion that indeed MUD 6 will have a representative on the One Water Task Force, let us support that motion, if there's a motion to be put on the floor.
This is Ron Cucci. So moved.
Okay, thank you, Ron. And is there a second, please?
Brooke will second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. I don't think there's much need for further discussion unless someone has something they want to add. Brian, we will go to the vote now. Brian, could you take the vote, please?
And
Yes,
if I
sir.
can-
This is Brian. If there's no further discussion, we'll call the vote. Neil, how do you
Sorry,
vote?
hang on, Brian. Jim had something?
I would just offer my suggestion that I think if the intent was for this to have a name somebody on your board as the Mud 6 rep, a person.
Doesn't need a motion.
Okay,
Well,
right. This is a very odd situation. If a member of a mud board gets invited to be a member of the One Water Task Force, and yet there's a request for another member, it looks strange to me.
and then I would say maybe suggest that this board kind of formalize this, that Neil, you're the rep for the Mud 6 to the Drainage Task Force.
This is Deborah, and I agree with you, Jim. I think that's the right approach, in my opinion.
Good with me too.
Okay, well, someone's gonna have to make a motion. I can't make a motion on my own behalf, so please, someone.
This is Ron
This is
Cookie. I'll
Deborah.
make the motion that Neil Gaynor be the representative of the One Water Task Force from Mud 6.
And this is Deborah Sargent, and I second that motion.
Okay, we beat that one to death. Thank you. So I'm going to abstain from this. Brian, would you take the vote, please?
This is Brian. All right, so we'll go ahead and go through the roll call on the vote again. Neil, I understand you're going to abstain. Brooke,
I vote aye.
Deborah,
Aye.
Ron,
Aye.
Bruce,
Aye.
motion carries.
Okay, thank you, Brian. Let's move on to agenda item 20. Consider and act on supporting Dr. Neil Gaynor, Mud 6, and Stephanie Certucci as alternate, Mud 7, as voting members to the Texas Water Development Board San Jacinto River Basin Regional Planning Group. And I am absolutely embarrassed by what Bob had put out there. I had no idea he was going to put my CV out into the world, but that's okay because I gave him a one-pager suitable for board membership. But anyway, I'm happy to entertain discussion about this. Again, this is something, when the vote comes up, I would abstain. But if anyone wants to make comment, now is your time.
Yes,
This is
Neil.
Deborah.
Your
This is
CV
Deborah Sargent. And I make a motion that we appoint Neil Gaynor and Stephanie to voting members to the Texas Water Development Board.
This is Ron Cookie. I believe we'd be nominating Neil Gaynor and then having Stephanie Certucci as the alternate, with only
Thank you,
one
Ron.
member,
You're
I
right.
think, representing Montgomery County.
This is Deborah, and Ron, you're right. I'm sorry.
I'll second that. And I will make my comment. Our agenda wouldn't be 132 pages long if it hadn't been for your CV.
Oh, God. All right, well, okay. I can't, sorry, guys, or everyone, it was unexpected to see it in there, and I'm not responsible for it, but.
Well, and I'd just like to add, Neil and several other directors have done a tremendous amount of work behind the scenes getting this topic to this point. Without their effort, Montgomery County would not be potentially having some a resident or elected official on this board. So I thank Neil and the group for the efforts. We're not there yet, but at least the idea is not completely killed at this point either.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor by Deborah and seconded by Bruce on supporting myself and Stephanie as voting members on the San Jacinto Regional Flood Planning Group. And I don't think there is need for further discussion unless somebody wants to add comment. Okay, Brian, let's go to the vote. And again, I'm abstaining from this one.
Okay, this is Brian. If there's no further discussion, we'll call the vote. Neil is an abstention. Brooke?
Aye.
Deborah? Ron?
It makes me proud to say aye in support of Neil as a representative on the Water Development Board for Montgomery County.
And Bruce?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay, thank you, Brian. Okay, let's keep going on this agenda. Item 21, approve a resolution authorizing the submittal of the 2021 Water Smart application. And I do have a question or clarification on this one. The resolution is on page 63, and I had a question about the dates in the resolution.
This is Mike. This is an annual exercise. What it is, it's a Water Smart submittal that's due in 2021 for all the activities that you did in calendar year 2020. Okay, so that's
so it's looking backward in time.
correct. That's correct.
Excellent. Thank you for
It's an annual, the annual exercise. We've been members of the Water Smart partner group since 2005. There's no cost to be a member. You just got to prepare the submittal and submit the documentation. One of the new requirements this year, not only is the resolution, they also want a copy of the minutes. For example, these minutes today where we discussed the resolution and approved it. So it's due March 1st, as I said, and with your approval, I will complete the application and get certified again for the 16th year.
Okay, great, Mike. I really appreciate that explanation. It just clarifies everything instantaneously. Okay, I would appreciate a motion to approve the resolution authorizing submittal of the 2021 Water Smart application. If I could have a motion, please, from the floor.
So moved. This is Brooke.
Thank you, Brooke. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Bruce. Is there further discussion? Okay, let's go to the vote. Brian, would you take the vote, please?
Yes, sir. If there's no further discussion, we'll go ahead and call the vote. Neil, how do you vote?
Aye.
Brooke?
Aye.
Deborah?
Aye.
Ron?
Aye.
Bruce?
Aye.
Motion carries.
I'll mute myself. Moving on to agenda item 22, receive the Woodlands Water Trustees Report. Ron, over to you.
Neil, thank you. In looking again at the minutes of the trustee meeting last week, I think all significant items have been addressed in today's session, primarily in Jim's general manager's report. I would like to make one comment before I invite any questions, and that's on that Tin Man project that was quite thoroughly discussed at the trustee meeting last week, partly by some new trustees who were not familiar with the whole process of how the SJR goes about their bidding process and awarding new construction. And I'm a bit disappointed that that's actually going to be an agenda item next week and how it doesn't become a continuing agenda item, because I think this was well within the scope of the SJR's arm of responsibility in doing engineering studies. And what they're trying to do in the engineering study is really fine tune what the total cost of this project will be if approved or once approved. That's just a comment I'd like to make, and Jim, for future reference, I guess, in future meetings. Maybe we can direct kind of that way without being imposing. But are there any questions that anybody would have, any of the directors might have on the trustee meeting minutes?
Okay, well, thank you, Ron. I don't hear questions from the floor. I appreciate your providing that comment in addition to your report. Okay, moving on to agenda item 23, and knowing we don't have Representative Howard Hughes here, but I will read it out. Consider an act on authorizing development agreements, design, advertisements for bids, construction contracts and/or change orders by developers on behalf of the district, acceptance of facilities and/or easement/site conveyances from developers, and receive development update. So I think given the circumstance where we don't have a representative, I think we should just move on without objection. I don't hear an objection. Okay. Let us discuss the future agenda and any announcements. Item 24, discuss any matters for placement on future agenda. And I open the floor.
This is Ron Kutchy. This might be premature, but I know on some of the presentation by you and Bob Lilac on the MUD 1 and MUD 6 merger possibilities, there was talk about forming the committee and maybe even coming back with monthly meetings. I don't know if the February meeting is too early to include that as an agenda update, but I just throw that out there.
Yeah, that's a good point, Ron. Neil Gaynor again. That's a good point, Ron. I would think at least we would have something preliminary to share in the February meeting. I doubt very much if we would have gone through in sufficient detail to hammer out what the recommendation would be. So we can have a brief update possibly, but I would prefer to leave it on the agenda to keep that question in front of us.
This is Ron, fair enough.
Okay, is there any other director wanting an item to be placed on a future agenda? Okay, hearing none. Let's see. It is now 2:42 p.m. and without objection, this meeting is adjourned.
Thank you, and congratulations, Neil.
Well,
Thank you.
really
Congratulations,
appreciate the
Neil.
support.
Thank you.
Okay, take care, everybody.